I never thought 5 words could destroy a marriage, but here I am, 3 months later, still hearing them echo in my head every single night. The cramping started at work on a Tuesday morning. I was 12 weeks along, finally past what everyone calls the safe zone, and I just started telling people about the pregnancy. The excitement in my chest turned to ice-cold terror as I felt the familiar warmth between my legs. I rushed to the bathroom, and there it was, the bright red stain that would haunt my dreams for months to come. Everything that followed felt like a blur wrapped in cotton. The frantic drive to the hospital, the cold gel on my belly during the ultrasound, the doctor's sympathetic eyes as she delivered the news I already knew. The silence was deafening. Where there should have been a tiny heartbeat, there was nothing but static. My husband held my hand through it all, whispering reassurances about how we could try again, how everything would be okay. I believed him then. I trusted that we were grieving together, that this loss would somehow bring us closer like all those articles about couples overcoming tragedy always promised. The physical recovery was brutal. Nobody prepares you for how your body continues the pregnancy process, even after the baby is gone. The hormones don't get the memo right away. I kept getting morning sickness for weeks afterward, my body cruelly reminding me of what I'd lost every single morning. The milk that came in was perhaps the cruelest joke of all. But it was during one of those awful nights when I was crying in the bathroom at 3 a.m. because my body was betraying me all over again that everything changed. I came back to bed, still sniffling, and he rolled over with this exhausted sigh. That's when it happened. Maybe it's for the best because we're not really ready financially. Maybe it's for the best because you've been so stressed at work lately. Maybe it's for the best because we haven't even been married 2 years yet. I felt like I'd been slapped. Here I was, mourning our child, and he was listing reasons why our baby dying was actually a good thing. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the relief in his voice when he said them. Like he'd been waiting for permission to feel glad about the miscarriage. I didn't say anything that night. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was married to a complete stranger. How could someone I loved so much, someone who I thought understood me completely, say something so heartless? How could he not see that every single one of his reasons felt like another knife twisting in my chest? The next few weeks were torture. He tried to act normal, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting we go out to dinner, even mentioning vacation plans for the summer. Meanwhile, I was drowning in grief and rage, unable to look at him without hearing those words over and over again. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's for the best. I started sleeping in the guest room, claiming I needed space to heal. Really, I couldn't bear the thought of him touching me. Couldn't stand the way he breathed next to me at night like nothing had happened. He seemed almost relieved by the arrangement, which hurt more than I expected. The breaking point came when I found the pregnancy test I'd saved in my jewelry box. I'd kept it because it was the first positive test I'd ever taken, the moment that changed everything. I was holding it, crying, when he walked in and saw me. His reaction wasn't comfort or understanding. Instead, he got this uncomfortable look on his face and asked why I was torturing myself by keeping it. He suggested I throw it away and move on. That's when something inside me snapped completely. Update 1. I confronted him that night. Really confronted him. Not just the passive-aggressive silence I'd been giving him for weeks. I told him exactly how his words had made me feel, how every single day since the miscarriage he'd made it worse instead of better. I expected him to apologize, to explain that he'd just been trying to help, that he'd said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Instead, he doubled down. He actually looked me in the eye and said that he'd been honest about his feelings, and wasn't honesty what marriage was supposed to be about? He said he was trying to help me see the silver lining because watching me grieve was making him uncomfortable. He was tired of walking on eggshells around me. That word, uncomfortable, it hit me like a physical blow. My grief was making him uncomfortable. Not heartbroken, not worried about me, not devastated by our loss. Uncomfortable. Like I was being too loud in a library or something. But then he said something that made everything click into place in the most horrible way possible. He admitted that he'd never really wanted kids right now anyway. He'd been going along with it because I seemed so excited, but secretly he'd been hoping we'd wait a few more years. When I miscarried, his first emotion wasn't sadness, it was relief. I felt like I was seeing him clearly for the first time in our relationship. This man who I'd shared my deepest dreams with, who I'd imagined growing old with, had been lying to me about something fundamental. He'd let me believe we wanted the same things while secretly hoping my dreams wouldn't come true. The worst part was realizing that all the signs had been there. When I'd brought up trying for a baby, he'd always been lukewarm about it. When I'd gotten excited about nursery ideas or baby names, he'd changed the subject. When I'd talked to my friends about how supportive he was being during the pregnancy, I'd been making it up because I needed to believe it was true. I moved back into the guest room permanently after that conversation. I couldn't even pretend anymore that we were working through this together. We were living like roommates who happened to share a mortgage and a last name. The isolation was suffocating. I couldn't talk to my friends about it because how do you explain that your husband was relieved when you miscarried? How do you tell people that the person who's supposed to love you most in the world basically said your baby dying was convenient? I felt like I was losing my mind keeping all of this inside. Work became my escape. I threw myself into projects, staying late, volunteering for extra assignments. Anything to avoid going home to the awkward silence and his careful, guilty glances. My colleagues probably thought I was having some kind of career awakening, but really I was just running away from my own life. The loneliness was crushing. I'd lost my baby and my marriage in the span of a few weeks, and I had nowhere to turn. Even my own family felt off limits because they'd asked too many questions about why my husband wasn't supporting me through this. Update 2. 3 months after the miscarriage, something unexpected happened that changed everything. I was cleaning out old emails when I found a message I'd completely forgotten about. It was from a coworker who'd left our company about a year ago, reaching out because she'd heard through the grapevine about my loss. She wanted to meet for coffee, and something in her message made me say yes, even though I hadn't been socializing with anyone. When we met up, she told me something that floored me completely. She'd had 3 miscarriages during her marriage, and each time, her husband had reacted with what she called practical relief rather than emotional support. But here's the twist that I never saw coming. She wasn't calling to commiserate about unsupportive husbands. She was calling to tell me that she'd finally realized something crucial. Her husband's reaction had shown her who he really was, and that information had been a gift, even though it was wrapped in the most painful experience of her life. She divorced him 2 years ago, and 6 months later, she'd met someone who understood that grief wasn't something to be fixed or rushed through. Someone who would have mourned their loss right alongside her. She was remarried now, pregnant again, and finally with a partner who truly wanted the same future she did. Listening to her story was like looking into a crystal ball. I could see my future stretching out ahead of me if I stayed in my marriage, more losses that he'd find silver linings for, more dreams that he'd secretly hope wouldn't come true, more fundamental incompatibilities disguised as minor differences of opinion. But the real shock came when she told me something else. During her divorce proceedings, she discovered that her ex-husband had been secretly using birth control during their entire marriage. All those months of trying to conceive, thinking they were partners in building a family, he'd been actively preventing it from happening, while letting her believe something was wrong with her body. This revelation hit me like lightning. I rushed home and tore through our bathroom cabinets, our bedroom drawers, anywhere he might hide something. I didn't find birth control, but I found something else entirely, a journal he'd been keeping. Reading it was like discovering I'd been married to a complete stranger. Page after page of entries about how he felt trapped by my baby obsession, how he wished I'd just let the subject drop, how he was considering ways to bring up postponing children without causing a fight. The entry from the day after we found out I was pregnant was devastating. He'd written about feeling doomed, about 12 weeks feeling like a prison sentence, about hoping something would happen to get him out of it. Then I found the entry from the day of the miscarriage. He'd written it that same night, while I was sobbing in the bathroom. He described feeling liberated, grateful, like he'd been given a second chance to figure out how to delay having children for a few more years. He'd actually written the words "thank God" multiple times. But the final entry was the one that destroyed whatever was left of my heart. It was from just last week, and in it, he'd written about his plan to suggest we take a break from trying to conceive for at least 2 years while we focused on our careers and finances. He was going to frame it as being responsible and mature, making sure we were truly ready before bringing a child into the world. He wasn't just relieved about the miscarriage. He was strategizing how to prevent us from getting pregnant again while making it seem like a mutual decision. I sat on our bedroom floor, holding his journal, feeling like my entire life had been a lie. This man had let me grieve alone while secretly celebrating. He'd watched me blame myself for losing our baby while knowing he was glad it happened. He'd made plans to manipulate me into postponing my dreams while pretending to be supportive. That night, I called my sister for the first time since the miscarriage and told her everything. Every awful detail, every cruel word, every revelation from the journal. She listened without judgment and then said something I'll never forget. She told me that staying in this marriage would be betraying the memory of my baby and betraying my future self. Final update. I filed for divorce the next week. I didn't confront him about the journal. I just told him I wanted to end our marriage. His reaction told me everything I needed to know about who he really was. Instead of being devastated or fighting for our relationship, he seemed almost relieved. He asked if we could keep things amicable and split everything 50-50, like we were dissolving a business partnership instead of ending a marriage. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth, probably because he was eager to get it over with and move on with his life. We sold the house, divided our assets, and within 6 months we were legally strangers. He moved across town and immediately started dating someone from his office. I heard through mutual friends that he told people we'd grown apart after the miscarriage. That grief had changed me in ways that made our relationship impossible. Let him tell that story. I know the truth. The first year after the divorce was brutal in ways I hadn't expected. Not because I missed him, honestly, I felt lighter without him, but because I had to rebuild my entire sense of self. I'd been so focused on being a wife, on our plans for a family, that I'd forgotten who I was as an individual person. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to downtown, somewhere that felt completely separate from our old life together. I painted the walls bright colors he never would have approved of. I bought furniture that was more style than practicality. I adopted a cat who sleeps on my pillow every night and purrs loud enough to drown out the silence. The grief from the miscarriage took on new dimensions once I was processing it alone. Without his toxic positivity and relief poisoning my healing process, I was finally able to mourn properly. I had bad days where I cried until my eyes were swollen shut, but I also had good days where I could remember the excitement of being pregnant without feeling guilty about it. I started seeing a counselor not because I thought I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd ended up married to someone so fundamentally different from who I thought he was. Those sessions helped me realize that I'd been so eager to build a family that I'd ignored all the signs that we weren't actually partners in that dream. About 18 months after the divorce was finalized, something beautiful happened. I was at a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon, reading in the coffee shop area, when someone sat down at the table next to me. He was reading the same book I just finished, and we ended up talking for 3 hours about everything and nothing. He didn't know about my divorce or the miscarriage or any of my history, but somehow the conversation naturally drifted to what we wanted from life. When I mentioned that I hoped to have children someday, his face lit up in a way I'd never seen before. He talked about how he'd always imagined himself as a father, how he couldn't wait to coach Little League and help with homework and teach someone to ride a bike. The difference was night and day. Here was someone who genuinely wanted the same future I did, who wasn't just going along with my dreams, but had dreams of his own that aligned with mine. We've been together for over a year now, and last month I found out I'm pregnant again. When I told him, he cried happy tears and immediately started talking about baby names and nursery themes, and all the things my ex-husband had always deflected. He's already started reading parenting books and downloading pregnancy apps. This time feels completely different. Instead of anxiety about whether my partner really wants this, I have total confidence that we're building something together. Instead of walking on eggshells about baby-related topics, we spend hours talking about our hopes and fears and plans. I'm 16 weeks along now, past the point where I lost the first baby, and every milestone feels like a victory. Not just because this pregnancy is progressing well, but because I'm sharing it with someone who truly wants to be on this journey with me. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd stayed in my first marriage. Would he have eventually admitted he didn't want children? Would we have gone through years of fake trying while he secretly prevented conception? Would I have spent my fertile years with someone who saw my deepest desires as inconveniences to be managed? The miscarriage was the most painful experience of my life, but in a twisted way, it also saved me from wasting more years with the wrong person. My ex-husband's cruel reaction showed me exactly who he was when it mattered most. And that knowledge set me free to find someone who would love me and our future children the way we deserve to be loved. I still think about that first baby sometimes, wondering who they would have grown up to be. But now I also think about how they led me to this moment, to this person, to this new chance at the family I've always dreamed of. Maybe that's the real silver lining my ex-husband never understood. Not that the loss was convenient, but that it ultimately led me to where I belonged. The irony isn't lost on me that he thought he was helping by pointing out why the miscarriage was for the best. He was right, just not in the way he meant. It was for the best because it revealed his true character before we brought a child into a marriage built on fundamental deception. It was for the best because it forced me to choose between settling for someone who didn't really want what I wanted or holding out for someone who did. I chose not to settle, and now I'm building the life I always imagined with someone who wants to build it too. That's the real silver lining, and it's one my ex-husband will never understand because he's still the same person who sees relief where others see tragedy, convenience where others see loss. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone who knows the difference between a partner and someone who's just along for the ride. I'm someone who won't accept lukewarm support when what I need is genuine enthusiasm. I'm someone who learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the thing that saves you from settling for less than you deserve. My due date is 6 months away, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm not afraid of what the future holds. I'm excited about it, confident in it, ready for whatever comes next because I know I'm not facing it alone. I have a true partner now, someone who chose this journey because he wants it as much as I do, not someone who's just hoping it works out okay. That's what real love looks like, and it's worth waiting for, even when the wait nearly breaks your heart.